I have a theory, but I need more.
Okay, I've been staring at this corkboard covered in strings, pictures, and notes for the last 8 weeks. That's normal TV watching behavior, right? Right? Right.
Correcto.
Marvel's first Disney Plus series came out swinging with an unconventional and mind-bending story that managed to be both confounding and endearing in equal measure. The bittersweet story of love between a witch and a synthezoid tugged at our emotions, while Easter eggs and clues led us down so many rabbit holes. Some were just misdirection, but some have left some questions on the table despite the complete ending the series got.
I think that Wanda is creating these impediments.
Here's some unanswered questions we still have and an attempt to fill in those blanks. It turns out that Agatha wasn't being completely honest when she's saying that it was Agatha all along. We'll forgive her for that overstatement just because that song was so good. And it put perfidious in our vocabularies. Now, we just have to learn to say it without giving off a quick ha-ha. While Westview was Wanda's doing in the end, Agatha had been there the entire time, prodding Wanda into using her magic so that she'd reveal herself and Agatha could find out how Wanda managed to pull this whole thing off. She found out that the secret was to be a Nexus being. But what we didn't find out is what Agatha has been up to in the 300 plus years since her coven tried to kill her and now. At some point, Agatha did develop a sense of right and wrong, but with an immortal's indifference to it. What has she seen that's made her this way? Hopefully we'll find out, because that means more Catherine Hahn as Agatha.
Okie dokie, artichoke.
One of the last Easter eggs to be introduced almost felt like it wasn't going to come around until it came up to Agatha's Book of Spells and a whole chapter on the Scarlet Witch. Agatha was fairly clear on that being a bad thing, but not super clear on why. That might mean that the Scarlet Witch has a truckload of magic power, or just a destiny that doesn't work out well for anyone. The answer we didn't get is what it actually says about the Scarlet Witch, other than she had the power to destroy realities and that Wanda was essentially a child with a loaded Death Star. Another thing we didn't learn is where Agatha got the Darkhold and what she's doing with it. Even more, is it the same Darkhold from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or is this a hard departure from the former TV series? Early in the show, it would directly interact with the movies, but that fell off towards the end with only a reference to the Black Order attacking Wakanda. This one appears to function differently, but then the Darkhold would adapt to whoever was reading it. By the 5th episode, there were 2 questions that everyone had. Who was that husband Ralph that Agnes kept talking about, and who was Fietro, and why did he look like the Fietro from an entirely different franchise? We got an answer to the first question, which gave us a sort of answer to the second one that ended up just being more confusing. Since Agatha didn't live in Westview like she said, she needed some digs to not look like she was an outsider. She did that by sending aspiring actor Ralph to his room and then making him play the part of Fietro, super speed and all, when Wanda needed a distraction. Casting Evan Peters from the X-Men franchise was a bit of meta casting, but is it just that, or is there a multiverse reveal further down the line? The show didn't shy from her ability to both bend reality as well as reach out to other realities, with a closing ad referencing her being a Nexus being. It could be a coincidence that Agatha knew there was a Fietro that looked like Ralph somewhere. Or it was some meta casting. Time will tell on that one. Chain of custody can be a tricky thing. When we left our Avengers at the end of the Chitauri invasion, we assumed that everything was as it should be. Loki's scepter had been secured, the Tesseract went to Asgard with the Asgardians, all was right in the world. But then the next time we see the Avengers, they're having to extract Loki's scepter from Hydra after they had gone and experimented on 2 Sokovians with it, granting them powers. When we last saw Vision, he was fallen in the field in the country of Wakanda, which had just opened its doors cautiously to the west, less via tourism and more by outreach. So how did Vision, who was covered in vibranium which Wakanda guards jealously, end up in Sword's hands? The brother and sister team of Shuri and T'Challa had been dusted by Thanos' snap, meaning that they weren't there to protect their fallen comrade, but their mom doesn't exactly come off as a pushover. It's a cinch that the first person Wanda talked to was her pals Shuri and T'Challa about where Vision went, who probably had a stern talk with Agent Ross, who might be the only person who wishes they were snapped if they weren't. Either way, it's probably Ross who ended up telling Wanda where to find Vision's body. One of the big speculations was just what was behind acting director Hayward's actions. Was he just a jerk, or was he also a jerk with a bigger agenda? Options ran from being a Skrull to being a member of a secret society. I didn't think he was secretly AIM. Why would you think he was secretly AIM? I mean, aside from times talking about the beekeeper being part of AIM. Moving on. So, what was behind Hayward's general unlikability? It might have been right there on the tin. Hayward was affected by the blip and blamed superheroes, adopting Stark's philosophy of building a suit of armor around the world. Apparently, he wasn't aware of how well that went the first time. One of the exciting things about WandaVision was seeing some of the supporting cast from across the shared universe come together as they all start hanging in the same circles. A grown-up Lieutenant Trouble, daughter of Captain Marvel's bestie, met with Scott Lang's federal parole agent and all-around super decent guy Jimmy Woo, and they added an astrophysicist with Thor as a reference to their trio. But when the subject of Captain Marvel came up, Monica couldn't move the conversation forward fast enough. Was she trying to hide her relationship to a superhero as a handicap in an organization like SWORD, where aptitudes like Hayward's are more common? Or is Monica mad at her former favorite non-parental adult? Perhaps Carol didn't visit while her mom was dying of cancer. Cancer she likely got being around space and radiation, like the kind that emanates from Carol. The answer to that question will come when Captain Marvel 2 hits theaters. We know that Monica will be a part of Captain Marvel because they told us that was going to happen, but also because of that mid-credits scene. Monica's pal reveals herself to in fact be a Skrull who is passing on the message that someone in space wants to see her, someone who is a friend of her mom's. There are 3 people in space who are friends of Monica's mom: Talos the Skrull, Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel, and Nick Fury. Nick Fury seems like the most likely answer to that question thanks to 2 clues. First, the Skrull messenger says he, meaning not Carol. We also know that 8 months after the blip, Nick Fury had replaced himself with Talos on Earth so he could go to space. So then, the only one left in space who has the power to do things like summon people to space is Nick Fury.
You do not ghost Nick Fury. I promise you, I'll call him.
Who will be excited to have another enhanced individual, especially one he has a long relationship with. There was a veritable clown car of predictions for who would make a surprise appearance in WandaVision. Mephisto, Nightmare, Grim Reaper, Sam Hain, Master Pandemonium, Doctor Strange, even Man-Thing, who guards the nexus of all realities, was on the table. One of the wilder pitches, however, was Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. The aerospace engineer friend of Monica's turned out to just be an aerospace engineer who was up for the challenge, and not a deep-cut character or big star reveal. The formal announcement of a Fantastic Four movie fueled anticipation, but the movie will be directed by John Watts, who's currently directing Spider-Man's 3rd outing. That means that there's been no time put towards casting. However, we do expect clues and hints to eventually lead to the reveal when the movie does come out. One of the clever and also completely disturbing details to WandaVision was the ads that would update along with the show, each one suspiciously relevant to a tragedy in Wanda's life before offering an option to deal with that pain. A Stark Industries toaster with a blinking red light, like the one on the mortar that was the unintended centerpiece of Wanda's childhood home for a couple of days. A Strucker watch and a Hydra bubble bath referred back to her time as a Hydra experiment. Lagos paper towels reminded her of her mistake she made in that country. Her inability to use Yo Magic allowed someone to die. And Nexus offered people a way to get over themselves. But who were those people? And more importantly, who were the ads for? Were they a manifestation of Wanda's misery that helped suppress the townspeople's psyche? Or is this a bit of Agatha trickery? Agatha kept trying to prod Wanda into using her magic and was trying to provoke a reaction. Maybe the ads were just Agatha's sly digs at Wanda all along. One thing that was absolutely clear over the course of WandaVision is that wherever Jimmy Woo, Monica Rambeau, and Darcy Lewis ate was the cool kids table. We always knew where Monica was headed, but Jimmy Woo and Darcy were a bit of a question mark. Please, let the answer be Darcy and Jimmy solving blip and anomaly-related mysteries in the MCU. In a cool van, maybe with Cosmo the Space Dog. Just make that a show. We did get a little bit of an after-party with Jimmy Woo, who's directing the FBI response to SWORD picking a fight with a superhero in New Jersey by animating the body of her dead ex-boyfriend. Good plan. And we got to see Monica get the call from outer space. What we didn't get was Darcy, who ghosted out early before things got boring and official. Just send her the commemorative t-shirt in the mail. The only question is, where do they mail it? Where did she go? Imagine that the MCU is a sweet Vista Cruiser station wagon, and at the wheel is Kevin Feige. In the back are all the fans. At some point during the ride, everyone in the car finds out we're heading towards Mutant Town, and we all lose our minds. Ever since then, we've all been chanting, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" at Feige, waiting for the first signs of mutants to appear in the MCU. No story lends itself towards mutants in the MCU as much as House of M. House of M just so happens to revolve around one Wanda Scarlet Witch Maximoff losing control of her powers and messing with the dials in regards to how many mutants there are. This one isn't just all in our heads. House of M appeared on wine labels, and Feige and Wanda herself, Elizabeth Olsen, talk about House of M as a part of Wanda's arc. Wandavision may just have been a prelude to House of M, so we're left asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Only Vision could end a battle with his exact duplicate with a discourse over a thought experiment, like a Wallace Shawn play broke out in the middle of an MCU movie. So good. Also the source for a little cheekiness, as Bettany had teased that he would finally have a scene with an actor he's admired for a while. The end of the Vision-only Algonquin Roundtable was that Vision 2.0 had the option to be the most Vision of two non-Visions by having Imaginary Vision share some Mind Stone magic and unblocking the hard drive with all the memories. That was good enough for 2.0, who proclaimed himself Vision and pieced right out, to be seen next in question marks? This not-quite Vision will join other not-quite characters who have cheated death in the MCU. Not quite the Gamora of the original timeline is wandering the universe, as well as not quite the Loki we know will be spending some time with the Time Variance Authority. Not quite Groot has been growing up on the Guardians of the Galaxy ship after Groot sacrificed himself for the team in the first movie. There are stories for the not quite Vision from the comics, it's just a matter of which one. Jimmy Woo's superpower is sincerity. He's just a genuinely good guy, and being a good guy means he sits at the cool kids table. People can occasionally underestimate the power of super sincerity, like when Hayward thought it was a punchline that someone somewhere missed Jimmy Woo. But the agent from Oakland is on the Quantico softball team. That implies that Woo is clutch. Jimmy wasn't being ashamed, he was being modest. That kind of friend-making means you can call your buddy at Quantico to help back your bluff. But who is Cliff? There is a huge tragedy that sits uncomfortably in the middle of WandaVision. Whatever happened to Agent Franklin? He was first revealed in broadcast as a beekeeper doing very un-beekeeper things like climbing out of sewers in the middle of the night. The answer to the question, who is the beekeeper, was revealed in episode 4, We Interrupt This Broadcast. Over Woo's objections, Hayward sends in another agent through the sewer system, which, sure enough, changes him. Even with the WandaVision rewrite, Wanda was having none of it and literally noped him out of existence. Like, entirely. Just like Jimmy Woo's witness, no one talked about him anymore. So, what happened to Agent Franklin? He doesn't appear at the briefing as an inside source with Monica, and the briefing doesn't cover that they still have an asset inside the Hex. Is he Franklin Richards, who was thrust into the future and out of our reality to become Kang the Conqueror? Well, that's a long shot, but maybe Darcy and Jimmy can solve the mystery of the missing Agent Franklin. While we did get a lot of answers to the various versions of the question, why, one question that never got answered was, why was Wanda broadcasting the show? Who was the intended audience? We did learn that she created the Hex in an explosion of grief, and really was only a step ahead of Vision in figuring out that her hands were on the wheel. One possible explanation is that chaos magic shooting out of her like a broken fire hydrant, quickly altering the reality of an entire town based on the innermost desire of someone in crippling grief, isn't going to have a back and forth on what she wants on how exactly it was meant to work. She wanted a life like a TV show. TV shows are broadcast, and at the end of every episode, you find out everything's okay. It's even possible that she was still transmitting after Hayward kicked the Dream Team out, but he hadn't thought to check digital signals. Just about everyone was sure that we'd see Doctor Strange at the end of this series, either as part of the big finale or coming in at a clutch moment or in a post-credits scene. The only thing we got was a familiar look at Astral Wanda studying the Darkhold. But now that we know he wasn't there, why wasn't he there? Wanda casts a ton of spells all at once and got the attention of Agatha Harkness. Monitoring this stuff is exactly what Doctor Strange does. Loki stood on a street corner for a few minutes before Strange was interviewing his brother. We'll find out either in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness or Spider-Man No Way Home. Right alongside Agent Franklin in the Are We Just Not Talking About This Person Anymore club is Jimmy Woo's witness. There were plenty of reasons for Jimmy Woo to be suspicious enough to not reveal the identity of his witness to Hayward and his team, and of course, it was a case of a missing town. Will it matter later? Maybe not. Maybe it was just a case of the matter-of-fact and charming Jimmy Woo just being professional. Though it seems like if he wasn't before, he's working the superhero beat now. I should take a moment to apologize to a character who is the focus of a lot of, apparently, groundless suspicion.
Don't shoot, I'm just a messenger.
I am, of course, talking about Dennis the Mailman. Not only was he not the man behind the curtain, he just kept walking around town. He was a man of his word. He was just the messenger. Sorry, fictional character I thought was Mephisto. My mistake. Of course, the big question mark is Wanda. We know she'll be a big part of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but the open question is, whose side will she be on? If the answer is her side, what will that mean for everyone else? As power-hungry as Agatha was, she was also genuinely worried about what Wanda would become. The question at the center of WandaVision was the question of whether or not Wanda was becoming the villain, and the answer was, it's complicated. She did what she did to those town people, and by all accounts, it was horrifying. And I really thought that Dennis the Mailman was up to something. It turns out if it felt like he was sending code, the code was, "Please help me." Well, these people are probably gonna have some pretty dark nightmares. Nightmare! Oh, it begins again.